Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this informative safety orientation video. As a career safety professional, I'm often asked, what makes a company so successful? The answer is very simple. It's the people. Our team members, employees and subcontractors are by far our most valuable assets. This is the reason we take health and safety issues so seriously. We believe that all accidents and injuries are preventable, and we're committed to achieving and sustaining environmental, health, and safety excellence through continuous improvements of our construction methods. This starts with charging you and all of your team members with the responsibility of maintaining a safe and healthy workplace. Our company cares about you and your family. Creating a safe working environment is how we show it. Please join us in supporting and improving our safety program and performance. Your life depends on it.
Our company maintains a policy of non-discrimination with all employees, as well as those applying for employment. This means that all aspects of employment with the company will be governed on the basis of merit, competence, and qualifications, and will not be influenced in any manner by race, color, religion, gender, age, national origin, handicap, or veteran status. We are also committed to providing a harassment-free working environment. Harassment, and in particular sexual harassment, is defined as unwelcome conduct, whether verbal, physical, or visual, that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. Harassment may include derogatory remarks, offensive jokes, the display or circulation of offensive printed or visual material, or offensive physical actions. Harassment of any kind will not be tolerated and should be reported immediately to your supervisor or HR so the situation can be promptly investigated and remedied. All employees are responsible for helping to enforce this policy against harassment.
Our management team is serious about our commitment to safety and the environment. This commitment is directed towards not having anyone injured and not having any damage to the environment as a result of the work we are doing on any project. We expect all employees, as well as our subcontractors and their employees, working on our projects to have the same commitment. The commitment to safety means that we want to make every effort to complete our project safely and eliminate the conditions that cause injury or illness. The commitment to the environment does not mean that we are trying to convert anyone to becoming an environmentalist. Just that if we do our jobs right, we can leave the project in the same shape we found them. Federal, state, and EPA and OSHA regulations cover the majority of the safety and environmental rules that will be in effect on our projects. However, there are a few additional rules as part of our corporate policy that you will be expected to follow as well.
What is incident-free construction? Now, this phrase is a simple way of saying that we do not want any type of incident that could cause personal injury, property damage, or environmental impact. We want each of you to go home in the same condition that you arrived, with the exception of being tired because you put in a good day's work for your employer. Everything on the project belongs to someone: management, some contractor, supplier, or some individual. And it is our goal that there not be property damage to anything on site, no matter who it belongs to. We also want to prevent spills of chemicals or other material that may impact the environment. Accidents by definition are unplanned events. However, if we plan our activities, we should be able to meet the goal of incident-free. This requires a commitment from everyone, starting with the management, and flows outward to each contractor, crew, and individual. This means the company, your crew, and you. Our management team expects all subcontractors and their sub-tier contractors who perform work at our project sites to, at a minimum, adhere to all federal, state, and local regulations pertinent to the work being performed under the contract, as well as our environmental safety, health policies, and procedures. While on our projects, you may be confronted with potentially hazardous conditions. These conditions can be kept under safe control when the rules governing their handling and control are understood and followed. Before starting work, make sure you're familiar with these rules and the safety responsibilities you will assume while working at this site. If violations of these safety rules jeopardize your welfare and that of others, your expulsion from the facility may be warranted. If you don't clearly understand these rules, or if safety problems arise that are not covered by these rules, contact your supervisor immediately for assistance. Let's discuss hazard recognition. What do you think a hazard is? Can you eliminate a hazard? If you cannot correct a hazard, what steps should be done to correct or protect myself from the hazard? What I want you to think about when you think of a hazard is that you're not the only trade out there working. So be aware of your surroundings, know who is working around you, and what kind of hazards are present. You need to recognize construction-related hazards and protect yourself. Now let's discuss some rules and regulations that will assist you in protecting you from some of the common construction hazards. You're going to hear the term competent person several times throughout this orientation. It is important that you understand what that term means. An OSHA competent person is defined as one who is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the surroundings or working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has authorization to take prompt, corrective measures to eliminate them. Therefore, it is important that you listen to the direction given by the various designated competent persons on a project, because each of these persons, by way of training and/or experience, is knowledgeable of applicable standards, is capable of identifying workplace hazards relating to the specific operation, and has the authority to correct them. When exposed to job site hazards, it is necessary to protect yourself by wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. The following is required at all times in the work area. Hard hat meeting ANSI Z89.1, Class B and C. Work style boots or shoes with leather upper and thick rubber or leather soles. High visibility clothing at all times, including a vest in high traffic areas. Long pants and shirts with a minimum of 4-inch sleeves are required. No shorts, tank top style shirts, and no shirts with cutoff sleeves will be permitted. Frayed and baggy clothing will also not be permitted, as they can present a hazard when working around certain operations. Additional personal protective equipment will be required in accordance with the hazard associated with the task you are performing. Some of that PPE equipment may be high visibility safety vest, hearing protection, gloves, face shield, special clothing, and specialty work boots. If you are unsure of the PPE requirements, check with your supervisor. Because falls are one of the most frequent causes of injuries, including the most severe ones in our work, fall hazards are a primary focus of our safety program. It is extremely important that you follow all fall protection rules and regulations. Fall protection is required anytime you are working at or above 6 feet and are exposed to a fall. Appropriate fall protection for the job-related activity will be required. Your supervisor will issue any or all fall protection equipment you may need. It is your responsibility to utilize the equipment properly. Additionally, fall protection training shall be provided to you prior to your use of the equipment. Do not use fall protection equipment if you have not been properly trained. After falls, strains and sprains, particularly to the back, are the most frequent and most severe or potentially disabling type of injury on our jobs. For that reason, focusing on behaviors that can contribute to strains and sprains is priority of our safety program. Our work is obviously very labor intensive, requiring lots of lifting, twisting, and climbing motions. Now, it's important to use proper body mechanics to protect yourself. When lifting, be sure to have a good grip, squat, and lift with your leg muscles, keeping your back straight. Don't be a superhero. Don't lift heavy objects by yourself. Wait until you have help. either from another worker or from special equipment such as a forklift or other device that can help you handle the material you want moved. When carrying objects, or even when just walking, be sure of the surface in front of you. Tripping over tools, materials, construction debris, including uneven ground, contribute to many injuries every year. Trenches and excavations can be extremely dangerous. Here are some things to remember about trenches and excavations. OSHA standards require that trenches be inspected daily and as conditions change by a competent person prior to worker entry to ensure elimination of excavation hazards. Never enter a trench until the competent person has conducted his inspection and has given you permission to enter. Never enter an unprotected trench. Trench collapses cause dozens of fatalities and hundreds of injuries each year. Trenches 5 feet deep or greater require a protective system or proper bench or slope depending on existing soil conditions. Trenches 20 feet deep or greater require that it be designed by a registered professional engineer. Each trench or excavation needs to be inspected at the start of each shift, following a rainstorm or after any other hazardous event. Some trenches and excavation may need to be tested for low oxygen, hazardous fumes, and toxic gases prior to anyone entering a trench. Always listen to the competent person and check with your supervisor if you are unsure if an excavation is safe to enter. Always keep heavy equipment and an excavation spoils at least 2 feet away from the trench edge. Stairways, ladders, ramps, or other safe means of access must be provided in all trenches 4 feet or deeper. No person in a trench should have to travel more than 25 feet in any one direction to reach a safe means of exit. A stairway or ladder shall be provided at all personal points of access where there is no break in elevation of 19 inches or more, and no ramp, runway, slope embankment, or personal hoist is provided. While working around or near underground utilities, always treat existing utilities as if they are energized. Now let's take a minute to discuss the company rules for scaffold safety. All scaffolds erected shall comply with all federal and local requirements. Scaffold erection, moving, or dismantling must be done under the supervision of a competent person. When the scaffold erection has been completed, a scaffold tag shall be placed at the scaffold access point, indicating the scaffold is ready for use. The use of scaffold tagging is mandatory. A competent person shall tag all scaffolds. No one shall work from an untagged scaffold. Prior to use, scaffold shall be visually inspected. Deficiencies shall be reported to supervision and a competent scaffold person. All walkboards must be scaffold grade. Handrails are required at 6 feet for scaffolds 45 inches wide, and scaffolds that are less than 45 inches wide require handrails at 4 feet. All rolling scaffolds must have wheel locks and must be locked while in use. Employees are not permitted to remain on scaffolds while they are being moved. The use of elevated work platforms continue to grow in the construction industry. Now, the two main elevated work platforms most commonly used are the boom lift and the scissor lifts. Each of these elevated work platforms have safety requirements that you need to be aware of. Both types of equipment require that the operator have valid training credentials in order to operate the equipment, and both require that the operator conduct a daily documented inspection of the equipment prior to use. Ask your supervisor for the appropriate forms. It is also important to keep in mind that boom lifts require the use of personal fall arrest system at all times while operating the equipment. Scissor lifts may or may not require personal fall arrest system while operating, but will depend on the project's specific guidelines as well as the manufacturer's requirements. Always check with your supervisor if you are unsure of the requirements. Both the boom lift and scissor lifts safety guidelines require that the worker's feet must remain on the floor of the equipment at all times while in the equipment. There is a wide variety of electrical hazards in our everyday construction activities. It is your responsibility to be sure that any and all damaged cords or equipment that you are aware of are removed from service and reported to your supervisor. Never use electrical tools or equipment that is damaged. Field repairs of electrical tools are never allowed unless completed by a certified electrician. The most recent accident statistics suggest that working men and women in America abuse and misuse ladders in the workplace, as a rule, rather than as an exception. These accidents can be avoided. The fact is, a ladder is one of the simplest, most easy-to-use tools in the construction industry. Prior to utilizing a ladder, verify that it is the right ladder for the job and that all ladders are used in accordance with the manufacturer's guidelines. Inspect the ladder for damage and remove the ladder from use and report your findings to your supervisor if the ladder is in disrepair or shows signs of damage. 2 or more people shall not work from the same ladder unless it's specifically designed for 2 people. Employees shall always face the ladder when climbing up or down. The top rung of a regular step ladder shall not be used as a step. Use both hands when climbing and descending ladders. Also, carrying tools while climbing or descending ladders is prohibited. In order to ensure all equipment brought into the project is in safe operating condition, there will be an initial inspection process and a daily pre-use inspection. Audits will be ongoing to ensure the equipment is in safe and proper working condition. Any equipment not passing all inspection requirements shall be red tagged or removed from the work area until serviced or removed from the site. Each contractor and subcontractor who brings equipment onto the project site will be required to perform and document the following inspections: an initial inspection to verify the equipment is in safe working condition. A daily pre-use inspection shall be conducted thereafter. Any deficiency found during these inspections shall be analyzed to determine if they present any immediate safety risk. If so, the equipment will be removed from the service and red tagged until the repairs are completed and documented. If there is no immediate safety risk, the equipment may continue to be used, but caution shall be exercised to ensure that the condition does not become a safety risk. When repairs are completed, they shall be documented on the inspection form to indicate the date, repair, and responsible party. Contact your supervisor for the appropriate inspection form. Operation of heavy equipment such as excavators, loaders, graders, rollers, and bulldozers should always be done by highly skilled operators who have demonstrated the ability and necessary skills to operate safely. Ground-based workers should be trained in how to work safely around the equipment and how to stay clear. Unsafe practices by either the operator or those around the equipment can create very dangerous situations. Serious injuries can occur if the equipment strikes a worker or if the equipment is rolled over. Here are a few common safety rules for operators and ground-based workers to consider. Number 1, good communication is essential. A standardized set of hand signals should be used by the operator and signal person. Operators should always know exactly where all ground-based workers are located, and the wearing of high visibility vests will help the operator to locate them quickly. The equipment should have a backup warning alarm that can be heard by all nearby workers. Two-way radios are also valuable communication tools. Number 2, heavy equipment must have a rollover protection structure meeting OSHA requirements. The rollover protection structure is designed to protect the operator if the machine tips over. A seatbelt must be worn so that the operator will not be thrown out of the seat during a rollover or upset situation. If working on slopes, try to avoid moving across the face of the slope. Try to operate up and down the slope face if possible. Use extreme caution when operating near open excavations. Number 3, wear hearing protection when required. If it has been determined that noise levels around the equipment could potentially cause hearing loss, always use protective plugs or muffs when working on or around the equipment. Number 4, never jump onto or off the equipment. Operators should always use the 3-point contact rule when climbing onto or off heavy equipment. The 3-point rule means having both feet on one hand or one foot and both hands in contact with the ladder access at all times. Number 5, don't operate equipment around overhead power lines unless you are authorized and trained to do so. Injury accidents involving heavy equipment on construction sites have a higher probability of resulting in a fatality than many other types of accidents. It is critical to follow all your company's safety rules and procedures when operating or working around heavy equipment. Employees using hand and power tools and exposed to the hazard of falling, flying, abrasive and splashing objects, or exposed to harmful dusts, fumes, mists, vapors or gases shall be provided with the proper personal protective equipment necessary to protect them from the hazard. Following these 5 basic safety rules can prevent all hazards involved in the use of power tools. Keep all tools in good condition with regular maintenance. Use the right tool for the job. Examine each tool for damage before use. Operate according to the manufacturer's instructions, and make sure you have been provided and use the right protective equipment. Specific training and/or certification may be necessary for some tools, including pneumatic tools, demolition saws, and chainsaws. If you are unsure of the specific requirements, please check with your supervisor. There are a few additional general safety issues that may or may not affect your work. However, we feel they are worth mentioning. If you're in a position where you are required to work with rigging equipment, be sure that you understand the rigging requirements. Remember to inspect all rigging daily. If you notice any rigging that is not in safe working condition, remove the rigging from service and report it to your supervisor. Remember, you must be properly trained in order to be a part of rigging activities. According to OSHA, a confined space is a space large enough and shaped in a way that allows an employee to enter and perform assigned work, and that has a limited or restricted means of getting into or out of, and is not designed for continuous occupancy. Our company regulates entry into confined spaces on all projects and job sites, and requires employees to be trained in the hazards of confined space entry and safe work procedures. OSHA Standard 29 CFR 1910.146 sets forth the conditions and basic procedures for permit required confined space entries. The standard requires management to identify confined spaces and develop a program to train and protect workers authorized to enter them. Never enter a confined space unless you have received the appropriate training and have been authorized to enter the space by the competent person. Should you be assigned to a task that requires the use of a respirator, your supervisor will be sure you have received the appropriate training, medical evaluation, and fit test prior to use. Compressed gas cylinders should be stored according to the type of gas, with empty cylinders in a separate area. Cylinders should be stood upright and secured firmly to the wall with a clamp and belt or a chain. Each cylinder should be individually secured, and the room should be designated for cylinders only, away from heat, light, or electrical wiring. Gas cylinders should only be moved on a cylinder cart and should be secured with a chain. The valves and caps should not be used to move or lift the cylinder, and unless a special cart is being used, regulators should be removed and all valves closed and capped. The cylinder should never be dragged or rolled. All connections on a cylinder should be tight, and hardware should be clean and free of oil or grease. Keep the cylinders away from heat and flames, ensure that they aren't punctured, and ensure that an appropriate number of staff are trained and equipped to handle a fire. When working around or near high voltage lines or overhead power lines, it is important to treat all existing lines as energized. If the lines cannot be shut down and/or insulation applied, a minimum safe distance of 10 feet must be established. As you drive down the road, you'll see all sorts of signs in many different colors. We know that red signs typically indicate a mandate, such as stop or yield, and yellow signs typically indicate a warning. Safety signs have a color scheme also. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, has established rules that define what certain colors mean. This standardization helps people to easily recognize and understand what message the sign or equipment is communicating. Some colors are red, fire protection equipment, danger, high risk of severe injury or death, emergency stops and alarms. Orange, hazard warnings, moderate risk of injury, guarding devices. Blue, notice of information, no immediate hazard. Green, safety equipment or information, first aid equipment or location. Yellow, caution statements, minor risk of injury. and/or material handling equipment. It's important to know the colors of safety when you're working around equipment. Now that we have covered some of the major areas of concern, let's take a moment to talk about fire prevention and control. Some of you may ask, why is fire prevention and control necessary on a construction site? We'll take a look at the next few pictures, and they should help illustrate why fire prevention and control is so important. As you can see from the pictures, it is always a good idea to be prepared for a fire. It is company policy that each piece of heavy equipment, as well as each company vehicle, have a minimum of one fire extinguisher available for use. It is also company policy that a fire extinguisher is kept near any hot work activities such as welding or cutting. It is also good practice to keep the projects free of combustible materials such as wood piles, trash, and general construction debris. If you're not familiar with how to utilize a fire extinguisher, check with your supervisor for the proper training. It is our responsibility as your employer to educate you in regards to hazardous materials that you may be exposed to in your work. Normally, you will not be exposed to any extremely hazardous materials on our job sites. However, you need to know that MSDS stands for Material Safety Data Sheet, and MSDS contains information including any specific hazards a chemical might have, what protective equipment, if any, you need when using that chemical, as well as emergency procedure if you are exposed and the cleanup procedures if there is a spill, and any specific firefighting rules. Your supervisor will cover the MSDS with your crew for any hazardous materials you might encounter. If you have any questions regarding a chemical, ask your supervisor. It is important for you to know that MSDS for every material on the site is available in the job office trailer, and all chemical must be in approved containers. Never bring chemicals onto the project without authorization from the project management. Our project should be in compliance with all standards at all times. However, in the event of an OSHA or other compliance inspection, do not panic. Here are a few simple do's and don'ts to follow. Do notify your supervisor immediately. Do a self-examination of yourself and your work area to double check that you are in compliance with the rules and regulations. Do cooperate with the compliance officer. Do not leave the site during an OSHA inspection unless other circumstances dictate the leave. Housekeeping is a fundamental and necessary activity that is required by every employee working on the project. Good housekeeping is a necessary requirement for maintaining safety at this project. Clean and tidy work areas hold fewer hazards for all employees. Accidents and injuries can be avoided and productivity improved where good housekeeping is a daily occurrence. All supervisors are required to enforce and monitor work areas routinely. It is important to understand what is expected of you in regards to reporting requirements. Incident, an unplanned event that either results or could have resulted in injury, property damage, or environmental impact. Hazard, any condition that could lead to an injury, property damage, or environmental impact if not corrected. Either an incident or hazard must be reported to your supervisor immediately. All injuries, regardless of severity, must be reported to your supervisor and the office immediately for proper documentation. Safety meetings are held on our job sites to promote safety awareness. You will be participating in periodic job-wide or mass safety meetings, a weekly Monday morning meeting with your crew, and daily informal pre-shift safety reminders. These meetings are intended to make hazard awareness a priority during our work operations. This is a good time for you to bring up any safety ideas or hazards that you have observed. But hey, don't wait for a safety meeting if you see something that could cause someone else or you harm. Report it to your supervisor right away. In case of an emergency, contact your supervisor immediately. If your supervisor is not immediately available, contact the required emergency services by calling 911. Assist with your emergency if you are qualified. Assist with getting emergency equipment or personnel to correct location. However, do not put yourself in harm's way to assist with the emergency. Now that we have discussed many different safety-related topics, let's take a minute to review a few very simple but important points. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment. Never utilize equipment such as fall protection, respirators, or pneumatic tools unless you have been properly trained and are authorized to do so. Never operate machinery or equipment if you have never been properly trained, have a current certification, and have authorization to operate that machinery or equipment from your supervisor. Never use hazardous chemicals without prior training. Never enter a trench, excavation, scaffolding, or confined space without first receiving the appropriate training as well as being authorized to enter from your supervisor and/or competent person. Assist in an emergency situation only if you are qualified. Immediately remove any damaged tools or equipment from service and report it to your supervisor. Always comply with compliance officers during an inspection. Immediately report any injury, hazards, or incidents to your supervisor. If for any reason you are unsure of a policy, procedure, or just have questions in regards to safety as it relates to your job or task, immediately stop work and seek assistance from your supervisor.
Thank you for joining us today and investing the time to learn what it takes to become a safe member of our team. May today's information empower you to have a safe and productive day.